Greetings, everyone, from the Union Pacific Railroad Evanston subdivision in HO Scale. My name is Daryl Cruz, owner and builder of this layout, and your host for episode 25 of season 2024. And although there is not any color, as you can see on this new section, I was able to add some rocks with rock molds to the Taggart Mountain and also get some track painted. So I have everything set for getting things going on the ground cover and paint and everything. Make sure you subscribe to this video, or to this channel I should say, and like the video. That would be great. This is kind of where we were last week with just a mountain shell, hopefully in the shape of the Taggart Mountains. One thing to note about all this, by the way, I have it flipped two different ways in order to fit the layout. So when I show you some prototypical photos, you have to remember that things are flipped around a little bit to fit this corner. But as you can see, I have everything kind of ready to go. I have my rock molds, some soapy water, some water for mixing plaster, a big pail, masking tape, and a spatula, and of course lots of plaster. So I was ready to go get some rocks on here. I do not have a lot of experience doing rock molds. I have done them before on previous layouts and some on this layout. But this is my first major effort on doing rock molds, and the Taggart Mountain has a lot of rocks on one side of the mountain and then just a few rocks on the other side. One of the first things I did before putting the plaster in the rock molds was to spray it with some soapy water, and then I mixed up the plaster and poured it in. Wasn't sure how much plaster it was going to take, so this is about 6 cups of plaster and 3 cups of water, and I thought that might fill it up. I didn't want to get to the case where I had all this plaster left over and drying in my bucket, so I kind of estimated low, and as you can see, I was actually quite low. So that's about 6 cups of plaster, maybe not quite 6 cups, maybe closer to 5. I actually used that red cup there, so for that red cup drinking glass, it was like 3 of those. And I think those are 16-ounce cups, so I'm kind of figuring out from that. So anyway, while I was waiting, I had to actually go and mix up additional batches, which I wasn't really crazy about because I would have plaster in there that's been, different parts of the mold would have different length of time in curing. Now, if you notice on my left hand here, I was a little concerned with the plaster running out of the mold there. If I was going to add some more there, it was going to have a bit of an issue. But I looked like I was going to have to mix things up again. So I actually mixed up 3 batches. I think altogether I used 6 or 7 of those red cups, which probably 10 to 12 cups of plaster to fill this whole rock mold. And this is a big rock mold, and I wanted to use a big one. I ordered these from a company. The URL is on the screen. You might want to check them out. They specialize in making latex molds. You can make your own too, but they have some really good ones. Got a couple of these $55. I think it's like 15 inches by 18 inches. So they're big, but I needed to have that because this particular mountain and some of the other ones in Echo Canyon basically have these big, huge rock faces. And I wanted to have it be as, one piece as possible so that it would look more natural rather than trying to put a bunch of rock molds up against each other. So anyway, I have enough plaster in there to fill the mold pretty much all the way, and just kind of smoothing things out, making sure all the different crevices are filled in and it was evenly distributed using my putty knife there, not a spatula, putty knife. And was trying to get some, it was kind of flowing over there, as you can see, so I'm trying to push it back in there. So that's definitely, if you use a big, huge mold like this, one of the key things is keeping it all level. Now, I could have put it on a table, but then I'd have further to carry it once I went from laying flat like this to actually being on the layout. So I wanted to have it close to where it was actually going to be applied, and then be able to just kind of flip it on there. So the cardboard definitely came in handy, kind of level things out, making sure everything was filled in. Wasn't able to get it all the way to the edge there. It was not going to be able to get that part to lay flat, but definitely had a pretty big chunk of plaster there that I was going to be able to put on the face of the mountain. Now, once I had it all in there how I wanted it, then I went out and went outside and washed out all the plaster. So that gave it some time to cure a little bit. And then, so it was probably about 10 minutes, I would say, maybe a little bit more, of just sitting there. And I went ahead and sprayed the plaster on the spot where I was going to place this. Now, I was a little concerned about the weight of this plaster, that it might crater the whole mountain in. And then, especially with, spraying it with water, which is not going to strengthen the mountain, it's going to weaken it a little bit. I was a little concerned that when I put it on, it might just all fall in. I only have, one layer of plaster gauze and then a layer of thin plaster on top of that. So it's not a lot of plaster there, but it is supported in a couple places underneath. All right, here, sorry about having my body. I should hopefully found a different place for the camera, but anyway, this is kind of how it worked. I lifted it up and I plopped it on there. And it was hard enough to where it wouldn't flow out at all. So that worked out pretty good. And I actually... I practiced it a bunch of times without any plaster in there, how I was going to flip it. So it actually came out pretty much exactly where I wanted it to go. And once it was down, then I pressed it in as much as I could. Now you have the contours of the mountain, and then the mold doesn't always want to bend to the contour of the mountains. So at the edges, a couple places, was not able to get it to go all the way down. Right there, there was some rocks that actually cracked a little bit. And I should have put a weight down on where my hand is right now, because when I lift up, as you can see, it kind of lifts up. But I didn't, and it still worked out, though, pretty good. All right, once it was like that, I let it sit there for about 15 more minutes to where it actually got hard enough to pull off the latex. Now you can see where it wasn't pressed down, the plaster is chipping off. Now where it was pressed down and it actually making contact with the mountain, it's adhered quite well. These latex molds are very high quality. Was able to get the mold off of the plaster without destroying it or anything. And it definitely has a lot of good detail on the rocks. There you go. So it actually came out pretty good. Now some of the rocks, I noticed the ones that kind of broke, they actually will keep those there. Um, we'll just simply have vegetation and stuff to cover up the cracks. So it's still going to look pretty good. And I'm going to ended up putting a mold on the other side a little bit to kind of meet up with the rocks there. So you can see this actually is loose, completely loose. But I plastered it back in there. The ones there on the edge are loose also, but I plastered them in so that they were solid. And then added a bunch more free rocks there towards the tunnel portals. But I was pretty happy with this first try. That was the hardest piece I was going to do. Then the idea was then to fill in the rest of it with additional molds that I have. I ordered 3 of these big latex molds. So look pretty good. Again, I was going to need to kind of have some more plaster kind of come up and meet this here at the top. All right, so here's what it looks like with everything filled in with additional rock molds. And then a lot of them are just some rock pieces that broke off. And then I just kind of plastered them in place. By plastering them in place basically means I put some plaster on the back of it, some wet plaster on the back of it, and then kind of glued it in place. Here's how it looked at the end where the mountain was blasted. As you can see, there were some, I added some additional lines in there for the stratification, which worked out pretty good. Probably a little bit more relief on those rocks than what's on the prototype, but I think it still looks pretty close. And you can see the stratification pretty well. Now there was one area here, I was trying to decide what to do about this here. It was kind of like a bare spot. Here you can see I kind of plastered in a bunch of loose rocks. Here's another area here. I wanted to get some more rocks on the other side of the tunnel portals. You can see all the loose pieces I put at the top of the tunnel portal. Here's some additional rock molds I put on this side to kind of meet up with the first casting. Now where there's cracks and so forth, these rocks are going to be covered up with a lot of vegetation. And I have some prototype photos here that you'll see that you can kind of see where the vegetation is. And I also needed to put in some additional rocks on the other side because this mountain does have most of the rocks on one side and not on the other. So here you can see the rock mold I put there. Now I wised up and put a weight down. These are a couple of latex molds made by Mark Bridgewater. These have a lot thinner relief than the ones I had purchased, but it came out pretty good. So this now is how it looks. I think this is pretty much how it's going to stay. Again, there's going to be a lot of vegetation covering all this. You kind of want the rocks to be underneath underneath the ground cover. So there will be quite a bit of, not completely covered obviously by a ground cover, but there is a lot of vegetation in the area. So here you can see a good picture of the vegetation that's there on this side of the mountain. I kind of zoomed in so it's a little fuzzy, but you can see all the different vegetation growing on the rocks. And there's kind of like some ground cover there. It's kind of a dead looking. Again, this is zooming in. And there's a lot of trees at the base of the mountain also. So it looks like, an an overdose of rocks. But again, there'll be some vegetation on there. There you can see the stratification. I'm going to work on some of these lines. Some of them look too straight. I'll maybe try to widen them a little bit. And but overall, I think it looks pretty good. And then I did put some rocks on the back side. I also kind of put some plaster in there to kind of tie the rocks into the mountainside, so it's not this gaping crack. And again, there'll be a lot of ground cover over all of this. Much more ground cover on this. This is what the other side looks like. So there's definitely a lot of ground cover on this side, bushes and so forth, and trees at the base, and then some visible rocks that still show through that you're able to see. So it should be pretty interesting. I'm really looking forward to doing the ground cover and painting and getting some color on here. This took a lot longer. Doing all these rock molds took about 2 or 3 days to do them all. And I did not actually get to painting them because you're supposed to let it dry thoroughly. And so you kind of want to wait until the color of the rocks is the same color as the base plaster. It should all turn all white. So it's still a little dark. There's still some moisture in it, so I'm going to wait till it gets completely dry. So sometime this week, probably Monday or Tuesday, I'll be using some acrylic, highly diluted acrylic paints to color them and hopefully get them to be the same color. Now here you can see I have everything masked off for painting, because before I actually start doing some painting of the plaster and so forth, I always want to get the track painted first. So this is how it looks today. All the track painted. Some of this track is concrete. Here you get some detailed look at the actual rock molds. So definitely these latex molds are very nice. I highly recommend them. It was $55 for the big ones. The smaller ones are a lot less expensive. I probably should have got maybe some smaller ones too, which I might still do. And again, the stratifications looks pretty good. The ones on the left, I think I'm going to work on a little bit more yet. And there'll be some vegetation again at the top here where the cracks are. Try and get that all filled in. And there'll be definitely some ground cover. You can see this is the ones that have ones on this side, a lot less relief on them. Here you can see the difference between the colors of the plaster too. Still needs a couple days to dry. So it definitely made a lot of progress. I was real happy with the progress I made on this, and will definitely be a big difference in looks next week when everything's painted and ground cover. Should look pretty cool. Here's the paint I use for the concrete, and after I did the railroad brown and everything to get the rails, I paint the concrete from the back side like this, so it paints the ties but doesn't get the rails. So if you look at those concrete ties, the ties are concrete color, but the rails are a dark brown. This is what I use for the rails. This is the wine color that I put on first, and then this is the dark brown, flat earth brown that I use after that. So that's what the color of the rails is, and also the dark brown is the color of the wood ties. And then I spray the concrete from the back to get the concrete ties painted, but not the rails. So it works out pretty good. So next week, in next week's update, we'll be able to see this with it being painted and with a lot of ground cover and all through here. I did place another order with Lombard Hobbies to get a bunch more of their clump woodland scenics, clump foliage, and coarse turf. I had all the fine turf I needed, but I needed to get a lot more of the coarse turf and the underbrush and clump foliage. It's going to take a lot of that. And then I'm also have on pre-order with Lombard Hobbies some trees that I'm going to try. I got some trees, some hikey trees where you get the armature and then you put the foliage on the armature. We'll see how great those look. But definitely will be some trees up against these mountains, and this is probably on the whole layout. This is where there's going to be the most trees because you have the Weber River going through here. So the whole place, Evanston Sub does not have a lot of trees except along the Weber River, and then Echo Creek will also have some trees. So there's going to be some trees along the base here, along with a lot of different types of things growing. And then eventually we'll get to the second part here. There'll be a couple of through truss bridges across here, and then the interstate going over the tracks, and then Devil's Slide. Definitely a lot of things to look forward to. This is going to be one of the more scenic areas of the layout. I think it's going to turn out pretty good. See a couple trains going through. Don't know if I'm going to actually do the water right away. I might wait on that. I might keep going with the basic scenery. I'm thinking of between here and the other Weber River across the front, I might actually put the river connecting, add a little bench work, and have a river that connects those two so that they're not separate. So right along here, the front of here, I might put the river going across. A lot of good things to look forward to. Definitely having a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Have a great week. I hope you have a wonderful 4th of July celebration. Stay tuned until next week. Take care, everybody.